Ladies and gentlemen and others, welcome once again to my channel. Thanks once again for being here. I really appreciate you and I appreciate your time. So today's topic isn't the sexiest one on earth. We're going to be talking about copyright and why an author would decide that he would rather put his work into public domain than have to deal with a greedy company.
Let's go, on board, let's go.
We're of course talking about the controversy that exploded last week online between Bill Willingham, the creator of Fables, and the company DC Comics. So it probably makes sense to just take a step backwards and first explain what Fables actually is and who Bill Willingham actually is. Fables is an American comic book series created and written by Bill Willingham. It was published by DC Comic Books as part of the Vertigo imprint. The main illustrator for the series was Mark Buckingham, and the comic book lasted between July 2002 and July 2015. It did also see a revival in 2022 with a 12-issue continuation of the main series, as well as a 6-issue spin-off miniseries, Batman vs. Bigby, A Wolf in Gotham. Only that, the comic book also made the jump into the video gaming sphere with a couple of very successful games. Fables was the name of the series, but it was also how these fairy tale creatures referred to themselves. The Fables comics were set in the early 2000s and followed the adventures of certain characters such as Bigby Wolf, Mayor Snow White, or Rose Red Prince Charming, and Boy Blue as they deal with troublesome fables and other problems that happen within the story. All of this also having the overarching narrative that they were refugees from their own homeland. Now, I know some of my older viewers right now are shaking their heads and going, whoa. Hold on, buddy. This sounds exactly like that horrible TV series Once Upon a Time. Well, maybe there were some surface similarities, such as that it was a fantasy adventure drama that was all about a bunch of fables that escaped from their own world, lived in our world. I'm pretty sure that the good people at DC back in the day, because maybe they were good people, looked at this and went, well, fairy tales are fairy tales. We're not going to go out there and sue people. But those people that might have had that mindset back in the day, they are long gone. What we're dealing with now is a Warner Discovery company that has taken a battering at the box office mostly, other than the few notable successes that they've had this year, and they are looking at maximizing their profits as much as they possibly can.
The point is, ladies and gentlemen, that greed, for lack of a better word, is good. Greed is right. Greed works.
As we all know, all countries have copyright laws in place to protect the authors of work. Copyright on any fictional work ensures that the author has the opportunity to profit from the work that they've created. It used to be that copyright would last for the lifetime of the author and then 50 years after their passing. And this extended copyright would allow not only the author but their family as well to benefit from the intellectual property that they had created. It was all obviously too good to last. Companies like Disney obviously stepped in and ensured that they could push out the actual copyright of any property way beyond the 50 years after author's death. I say obviously because greedy corporations will greedy corporation whenever they can. I'm not going to go into the history of copyright law and how corporations have screwed us as the public over time. Instead, I'm just going to leave a link down below where Adam Conover of the channel Adam Ruins Everything very clearly explains exactly how Disney went about abusing the copyright system. So that just leaves one more thing to explain, and that is, what is public domain? If a work falls into public domain, it just means that that piece of work is now available to the public as a whole, especially because it is no longer subject to copyright. That means if you should choose to use the characters created by a person, and that characters now fall into public domain, you can't get sued by any company for the work that you've created based on that character. It is a double-edged sword because that's how you kind of end up with a movie like Pool, Blood and Honey. That's how all of this started. On September 14th, 2023, Bill Willingham posted on his personal blog These Foolish Games. Willingham sends Fables into public domain. Here below is a press release I sent out today to explain what I did and why. Within the body of the press release, it then states, as of now, 15 September 2023, the comic book property called Fables, including all related Fables spin-offs and characters, is now in the public domain. What was once wholly owned by Bill Willingham is now owned by everyone for all time. It's done, and as most experts will tell you, once done, it cannot be undone. Taybacks are neither contemplated nor possible. This, of course, is incredibly massive. This author is giving up his rights to a property that he created over 20 years. Obviously, he knew that we would all want to know why exactly he would do such a crazy thing, and he went on further to explain within his press release. I've thought this over for some time. In no particular order, they are. Practicality. When I first signed my creator-owned publishing contract with DC Comics, the company was run by honest men and women of integrity who, for the most part, interpreted the details of that agreement fairly and above board. When problems invariably came up, we worked it out like reasonable men and women. Since then, over the span of 20 years or so, those people have left or been fired to be replaced by a revolving door of strangers of no measurable integrity who now choose to interpret every facet of our contract in ways that only benefit DC Comics and its owner companies. At one time, the Fables properties were in good hands, and now, by the virtue of attrition and employee replacement, the Fables properties have fallen into bad hands.
Gentlemen, in exactly 5 days, we will be $100 billion richer.
Since I can't afford to sue DC to force him to live up to the letter and the spirit of our long-time agreements, since even winning such a suit would take ridiculous amounts of money out of my pocket and years out of my life, and in parentheses, I'm 67 years old and I don't have the years to spare, I've decided to take a different approach and fight them in a different arena, inspired by the principles of asymmetric warfare. The one thing in our contract that the DC lawyers can't contest or reinterpret to their own benefit is that I am the sole owner of the intellectual property. I can sell it or give it away to whomever I want. I choose to give it away to everyone. If I couldn't prevent Fables from falling into bad hands, at least this is a way I can arrange that it falls into many good hands, since I truly believe that there are still more good people in the world than bad ones. I count it as a form of victory. Not relevant to this argument, but we've obviously had other creators in the past also have major issues with DC, such as Alan Moore, really hating what they did with his creative property. Bill Willingham in his press release then goes on to state, it's also a matter of philosophy. In the past decade or so, my thoughts on how to reform the trademark and copyright laws in this country and others, I suppose, have undergone something of a radical transformation. The current laws are a mishmash of unethical backroom deals to keep trademarks and copyrights in the hands of large corporations who can largely afford to buy the outcomes that they want.
Sure, how he caused the meltdown. There wasn't any nuclear material in the truck.
Oh, very well. It's time for your bribe. Now, you can either have the washer and dryer where the lovely Smithers is standing, or you can trade it all in for what's in this box.
The box. The box.
Look, Burns, this is a big problem. You just can't throw money at it and make it go away.
Gentlemen, I've decided there will be no investigation now. If you excuse me, I'll go away.
If you watch the Adam Conover video, you'll see in that Disney actually lobbied Congress in America to extend the duration of copyright way beyond what it used to be in the past. Now, in some countries, it's up to 100 years after the death of the author. There is just no reason for this other than egregious greed from these large corporations. Bill Willingham goes on to state, in my template for radical reform of these laws, I would like it if any IP is owned by its original creator for up to 20 years from the point of its first publication and then goes into the public domain for any and all to use. However, at any time before that 20-year span bleeds out, you, the IP owner, can sell it to another person or corporate entity who can have exclusive use of it for up to a maximum of 10 years. That's it. Then it cannot be resold. It goes into the public domain. So then, at the most, any intellectual property can be kept for exclusive use for up to about 30 years and no longer without exception. Now, I'm just going to say, personally, I would think that 30 years is a lot better than 70 years. It is a pretty short time period for somebody who's only going to create one type of work ever in their whole life. However, I think most creative people are capable of creating more than one intellectual property. So, the next question is, what exactly has DC Comics done to provoke this? Too many things to list exhaustively, but here are some highlights. Throughout the years of my business relationship with DC, with Fables, and with other intellectual properties, DC has always been in violation of their agreements with me. Usually it's in smaller matters, like forgetting to seek my opinion on artists for new stories, or for covers or formats of new collections and such. In those times when called on it, they automatically said, sorry, we overlooked you again. It just fell through the cracks. They use the fell through the cracks line so often and so reflexively that I eventually had to bar them from using it ever again. They are often late reporting royalties and often underreport said royalties, forcing me to go after them to pay the rest of what's owed. Of course, this does come from one perspective, but that does not sound like a fair partnership at all. It gets worse though. These things always get worse. Bill Willingham also states, lately though, their practices have grown beyond these mere annoyances, prompting some sort of showdown. First, they tried to strong-arm the ownership of Fables from me, When Mark Doyle and Dan DiDio first approached me with the idea of bringing Fables back for its 20th anniversary, both gentlemen since fired from DC, during the contract negotiations for the new issues, their legal negotiators tried to make it a condition of the deal of the work to be done as work for hire, effectively throwing the property irrevocably into the hands of DC. When that didn't work, the excuse was, "Sorry, we didn't read your contract going into these negotiations. We thought we owned it." Now, work for hire is what these companies do when you work on one of their properties. Like in the case of DC Comics, for instance, if you came along as a writer or an artist, you would get to work on a property such as Batman or The Flash. And that doesn't mean that you are assigned any kind of copyright. The copyright still belongs to DC. For DC to try and turn around and make the work done by Bill Willingham on Fables into a work for hire agreement, they were basically really trying to steal the property out from under him.
Why you gotta be such a bitch? Hey.
I will link to Bill Willingham's Substack down below, and you can read the entire press release that he created, but there were lots of other issues, such as DC wanting to be able to affect any changes that they wanted to the intellectual property. Okay, so where does that leave us? Well, it's a great idea. If the intellectual property belongs to everybody now, if it is in public domain, then any one of us sitting out there can actually create work based on the Fables characters. This is fantastic. Isn't this exactly what Disney's done over the years? They basically jump into public domain, they grab whatever characters they want, they dress it up in something new and something a little bit more modern in terms of its visuals, and then they offer it to us, and then they block the copyright, preventing any of us from actually using those characters again, or in the same format at least. Bill Willingham is cutting past this nonsense, and he's putting it out into the public domain. That means we can all just use this property however we want to, hopefully in a respectful manner. And so this is exactly what we all did. We created wonderful new works based on this property because it all fell into public domain and everybody lived happily ever after. Except, of course, we didn't, because DC immediately struck back. On September 18, 2023, DC commented publicly on this whole topic of Fables being put into the public domain. According to DC insists that Fables comic book series is not in the public domain despite the creator's claims. DC does reserve all the rights to all of this. Of course, after the DC statement, Bill Willingham made the following comment. Shortly after creating Fables, I entered into a publishing agreement with DC Comics. In that agreement, while I continued to own the property, DC would have exclusive rights to publish Fables comics, and then later that agreement was expanded to give DC exclusive rights to exploit the property in other ways, including movies and TV. DC paid me a fair price for these rights, fair at the time, and as long as they behaved ethically and above board and conducted themselves as if this were a partnership, all was more or less well, he continued. But DC doesn't seem to be capable of acting fairly and above board. In fact, they treated this agreement, as I suppose I should have known they would, as if they were the boss and I their servant. In time, that got worse as they later interpreted our contracts to assume they own Fables outright. Look, I'm not going to rehash what I think about greedy corporations. They are the worst. Every opportunity that they have to grind down the individual, they will certainly do so. I am very ambivalent about copyright and public domain and fight between those two myself. As a creative person, as an artist, I definitely believe that artists should have copyright on their work to prevent unscrupulous people from stealing their stuff, whether it's another creator or whether it's a company. I think, like most people, I take issue with the fact that sometimes the copyright gets strung out for way too long, though, preventing other people from creating derivative or new works. I myself, though, have put my stuff into Creative Commons, which allows other artists to use my artwork as well as to change it and adapt it for whatever purposes they might see fit. And there's an argument to be made for public domain. Every time you watch a movie where it's a character that's fallen into public domain and you see this fantastic movie or game that's been based on the work, like something like The Call of Cthulhu, for instance, then we can appreciate how that work has lived on way past the life of the actual author itself. Maybe the only question should be how long that copyright should last for the author. Maybe something like 50 years is a reasonable time period from the time that the character was created, because that would definitely give any author enough time to benefit from having that character as their own copyright. The excessive lengths that Disney has gone through to keep copyright on a character like Mickey Mouse makes me feel that maybe there is truth to the rumor that Walt Disney actually isn't dead and they've still kept him on ice. But because they can't tell any of us, they have to keep on pretending that he's actually dead and therefore they know that the 50 years after the death of the author still hasn't expired, and that's why they're trying to actually keep it. But that conspiracy theory aside, maybe they're just greedy assholes.
A runabout. I'll steal it! No one will ever know! No one will ever know! No one will ever know! No one will ever know!
Greedy people and companies always find ways to dodge around everything. A character like Tarzan, for instance, is actually in public domain, or the first few of his ventures actually are. However, the name Tarzan itself has been trademarked. That means nobody can use anybody that resembles Lord Greystoke, King of the Apes, Lord of the Jungle, in any kind of media without risking getting immediately sued by Edgar Rice Burroughs' company. Now, this kind of shit I don't think should be allowed. Trademarking and copyright kills the freedom to create things. It's as simple as that. It's a thorny issue. It basically comes down to the rights of the individual versus what is best for society. There isn't necessarily a right answer, but I think what Bill Willingham is trying to do is something much better than allowing corporations to take whatever it is that creatives have created and then slap a copyright or trademark on it forever. So I think greedy corporations are going to greedy corporation. That's about all that I can say about that. Anyway, thanks for listening along, folks. It looks like this is going to become a huge lawsuit. It will affect a whole lot of people out there in the world that are creators, so I'll be sure to keep an eye on it.